Hi everyone! Okay, so here's the context for this video. Basically, about a month ago, there was this event called the 12th Annual mEducation Alliance Symposium in Washington, D.C., and it was a conference where educators from around the world came together to discuss how to improve education. We're talking how to build better technology, such as stronger projectors, cheaper tablets, and also improve infrastructure, and also, how can you reach kids in underprivileged areas who might not even have internet access? All these different things. So, how does this relate to me? Well, my YouTuber friend Gizmote, who's also a musician, check out their music, invited me to the symposium. And I feel like it was such an honor for me because if you check out the schedule for who's giving talks, they actually let me talk about my educational experiences on this panel called Amazing Educational Videos Showcase. The 6 other people here also gave presentations about what they were doing, such as, say, going to Africa and setting up a TV network called Achille and Me, which is like being watched by 30 million kids in Africa. It's honestly astounding the good work that some of these people are doing. So I felt very humbled to be in their company. But in my presentation, I wanted to talk about what I knew about, which is sort of the last decade and a half where I've been making some educational videos and tools on the internet. So I brought up X finds out his value and the scale of the universe because both of those have gotten way more traction online than I ever could have expected. And I think the feedback I've gotten from like the comment section has like taught me a lot about what people like and don't like about educational stuff. So I want to play you the 12-minute video clip of me talking in front of the audience. But I also want to point out one thing, which is, you know how most people kind of cringe at the sound of their own voice when it's played back to them? I feel like for me, I've gotten over that mostly just because I've been doing YouTube for so long. But I think that because talking in a sort of professional conference is still a very new thing to me, when I watch this video, I still like self-cringe a little bit just because it's so surreal to like watch myself on stage like that. And it's just like not something I'm used to. I still think I'm really glad I had this experience and I locked it under my belt, something new that I've learned. But yeah, if you want to watch the talk that I did, and maybe like learn something about the scale of the universe, then keep watching. Yeah.
Well, a number of the representatives that are here, that would be a really important conversation for us to continue as well. So thank you for concluding. Carrie, I don't have a title for you, because I know sitting at lunch there are so many different things that you're doing. Yeah. So I think you're just going to have to provide your title to people. Okay. And while you're telling us about putting everything to scale. So over to you, Carrie.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. So I'm Kerry Huang, and I have a twin brother named Michael, and the two of us have been creating educational content on the internet since about 2008 when we were about 11 or 10 years old. And I guess in this presentation I want to walk you through the journey of how that happened. And we should first start off with where it all began. So on the left, that's me in 6th grade, and on the right, that's my twin brother Michael. And at the time, we were taking this class called pre-algebra, which is sort of like a preparatory class going into algebra. And then on the right, I have an example worksheet of what you might learn in pre-algebra. And those aren't the exact homework problems themselves, because obviously I didn't take pictures of my homework. But the gist that I want you to take away from this is that it's kind of boring and dull, because you're just looking at black text on white paper. And I remember at the time, I had a teacher named Mr. Flake, and during Thanksgiving break, he gave us this assignment to somehow liven up math. And I remember some of my classmates would write poems or fictional stories about the math subject. But what I decided to do was to embark on my first full-fledged animation, which was a genre that I had always wanted to get into, but I never had the final push. So I decided to create this show called X Finds Out His Value. And the main idea of this show is that I take all the algebraic elements of an equation, like the numbers and the variables and the operations, and sort of personify them all. So you can see that on the left we have 4, who is blue, and he's got a face. And on the right we have X, who's yellow, and he's also got a face. And I think the main idea of this was that a lot of kids will groan when they hear it's time to learn math, and you might think that's just because they don't see why math is useful, and that's why they always ask, like, when will we ever use this later in life? But I think, something can be useless but still interesting, because a lot of the things that kids are actually into are also useless. I don't want to say useless, but people can be into video games that have a very compelling storyline, even though that'll never come in handy later in life. Or maybe they're really into reading Harry Potter or movies. So that was the idea with 4 and X. And there was supposed to be a video clip here of like the first minute of the show. But, okay, I don't know if I have the script memorized, but basically like 4 is walking along, and then he sees X sitting registry looking depressed. And then he says, X, what's wrong? You look depressed. And then X says, his voice is really high-pitched. He's like, I don't know how to do it right now. Oh, I don't know. I just feel depressed because I don't know what my value is. So then 4 says, oh, we can solve that for you by going to the equation playground. And on the equation playground, there's a bunch of seesaws. And by kind of moving characters from one side of the seesaw to the other, they eventually find out that X equals 7. And he feels so fulfilled because he knows what his true identity is. So it's kind of like a very happy ending. So yeah, I guess the main idea is that by turning every single algebraic task into like a plot storyline, it makes things interesting. So something like canceling out like terms. That sounds boring when it's just pencil and paper. But in this show, because they're characters, canceling out terms is like killing characters, and that's very interesting. You want to know what happens next. So that is X finds out his value. And then one last thing I want to talk about, which I think is really interesting, are the YouTube analytics. Because I spend so much time on YouTube that I really obsess over numbers and what grows channels and what doesn't. So we uploaded this video in 2008, and for almost a decade, nothing happened. And then just around the end of 2017, there's a very clear uptick, and now it's accelerating upwards. And you might wonder, what's causing this? Are we promoting algebra more, or maybe like the school year started and kids need to learn algebra? Well, the real reason is that we started this unrelated cartoon animation called BFB at the time, and this show is admittedly not educational, but we sort of reuse the same characters. So 4 and X show up in the show as hosts for some fake competition. And what I think is interesting about all of this is that this is showing me that even though this content isn't educational, it's getting the kids to fall in love with the story of 4 and X, so that they will go out of their way to sort of search for 4 and X's adventures anywhere else on the internet. And by doing that, they stumble upon this 10-year-old video about algebra, and they end up learning about it even, when they're 5, 6, 7 years old, which is before they might learn about it in school. So I guess the moral of the story is sometimes the best way to put algebra in front of kids' eyes isn't by just shoving it in front of their eyes. It's to sort of get them to fall in love with the characters and then they'll find it out on their own path. Okay, so the second half of the presentation, I want to talk about the scale of the universe, which is an educational website I made, and also this was supposed to be a video clip here. But the idea of scale of the universe is that it's an interactive website that compares the size of objects in the universe from humans to galaxies to atoms. And I think by making it and posting it online and hearing the feedback from people from around the world, I sort of learned some kind of general observations about what works and what doesn't work in terms of making the information very compelling. So one part of that is something I actually wrote in my college essay that got me to Stanford, which was that in 7th grade we often learn about scientific notation, such as the fact that the largest star in the universe that we know of is 1.5 times 10 to the 12th meters in radius. Now this number is accurate, and we can even do mathematical operations to learn meaningful things about the star, like its density or maybe how many solar masses can fit inside of it. But it doesn't really give you a visual for how big this star really is, or if you were to walk outside right now, what would it look like if that star was just right in front of us? That would be wondrous. Anyway, on the right I have 2 screenshots from the scale of the universe that I made, and my goal was to make it visual and make it so that you don't have to, sludge through lots of math and numbers to understand it. So, like on the top, there's some pink text that says the sun, pointing to a single pixel, which is the sun, which is itself 100 times bigger than the Earth. And then on the right side, like you can see it says Deneb, which is a star that's so big it doesn't fit the screen. But that star itself is only a small white dot in the lower right. And so you can see that VY Canis Majoris is 10 times larger than even that star. Yeah, so some takeaways I had from hearing people's feedback are that, like, one cool tactic is you can combine both the usual and the unusual. So when I tried to pick objects to include in Scale the Universe, I decided to pick both animals that people were very familiar with, like elephants, giraffes, and humans, and then I kind of added this wild card, which is the Japanese spider crab. And I totally didn't expect this at the time, but its wingspan is larger than humans are tall. So the reason why I wanted to do this is because, like, so when I uploaded Scale the Universe online, you can see that the Google search trends for elephants didn't really change at all, and they stayed static. But for the Japanese spider crab, there's a very clear uptick on February 1st, 2012. And I think what that shows me is when people are looking through Scale the Universe, they already know about elephants, so they don't need to search it. But a spider crab, like, they want to go through the extra effort of researching it further. So I guess what I wrote is that the common objects provide context, but then the strange ones that really catch your eye make you want to push the envelope and push your knowledge further. And then the second observation is that not every object in this tool has to be a real physical thing. So one object I put in there is the smallest object visible to the naked eye. And this kind of, as a single element, teaches us a lot about all sorts of objects nearby without me having to say the same thing over and over. So for example, in the lower left, you can see a dust mite. And just by comparing it to the hypothetical gray circle, you know that it is visible. So if you saw a dust mite crawling on your desk, you would be able to see it just barely, because it's just barely larger than that dot. And then the last few slides are just sort of fun, data points that I've noticed over the years. I'll just rapid fire through these. So the top 4 most commented on objects are: number 1, Minecraft World, because this came out in 2012 when Minecraft was at the peak of popularity. And that's based on an integer overflow glitch. So I think it's always fun when you can find weird quirks in video games and use that to kind of compare it to real life objects like Neptune. And then the second one is the fact that helium atoms, which have more protons, neutrons, and electrons than hydrogen atoms, are actually smaller because of the way that protons and electrons attract to each other. The number 3 is total human height. You might expect that this should be 6 feet because that's the height of a human, but this is the total height of all 8 billion humans if they're laid in a line. And that ends up being, I think, 12 million kilometers, which is 10 times larger than the sun. And everyone always thinks this is a bug. They keep reporting this as a bug to me. You need to fix this. Maybe some numbers got offset by a factor of 10, but that's actually accurate. And then the fourth one is, this is a mobile app. So my brother coded it so that within the phone screen, you could see the size of your own phone screen, and it would have this recursive infinite effect of phone screens within phone screens. And that's called the Drost effect. Yeah, and this is just a fun art piece I made where I tried to distort the objects to make them all fit on the screen. But I found that this tool, even though it's mostly about astronomy and biology, you can also combine fun parts of math, because here I'm trying to map the logarithm of the distance from the center to the x-axis and angle to the y-axis. It's a lot of complicated stuff, but the gist of it is, even when a project is done, you can always explore more by manipulating it, or trying to look at it from a new perspective. I literally call this the Scale of the Universe, but unfolded. And that is the end. There's me when I was 9 years old. Thank you for listening to my presentation.
Thank you, Carrie. And of course,
Thank you for having me.
yeah, Carrie, did you bring your computer with you?
No, I did. It's in my hotel.
So, but maybe if you want to site, Stellar Universe, we could just circulate on Hoova the address.
Oh, yes.
So we'll send it around to her. So thank you, Carrie. Appreciate it as well. Yeah, pleasure. And then stick around because we'll have a few questions afterwards. All right, I'd like to invite our colleagues from Achille Network to join us. Jesse Soleil, President and co-founder, and Jeff